Today I'm talking with thought leader Jeff Curtis to share ideas and insights with the entertainment, events, and sports community. Jeff is the CEO of the iconic Portland Rose Festival Foundation, and prior to joining the foundation over 22 years ago, he worked in professional sports sponsorship. So Jeff, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Happy to talk and share a little insight down here in Portland, Oregon.
Well, I'm really excited to hear how you spent this last Memorial Weekend, since it was the first time you've had a Memorial Weekend, I believe, in about 25 years. The Portland Rose Festival was scheduled to open on the 22nd, last Friday. So what did you do all weekend?
Just an odd weekend, an odd in only context. I'm so used to being in the throes of the festival. Portland Rose Festival is basically a 3 to 4 week long community celebration, over 50 to 70 different events in any given year, and really kicks off this Memorial Day weekend traditionally. So it's been a big part of my life at Rose Festival for 20 years. And prior to that, working in minor league baseball and professional baseball, it's a big part of the season. So highly unusual that I was working, but not working in a context of down at a physical park and just managing a festival experience. So our weekend was different. I'm very proud that the Rose Festival team, staff, and volunteers, we had a virtual opening night on May 22nd. Virtual meaning Facebook Live. We produced a 1-hour experience, and it was a tremendous success. Nearly 10,000 viewers. Had a great opening night with this band called Hit Machine. Just a tremendous night. Fireworks, you name it. And then we gave us a chance to tell our story on Facebook Live. So that was a good success. And then we went into the weekend doing our parading in place. In Portland, we're still under the strict quarantine, and thus we can't put any parades on the street, can't even come close. So we asked the community to decorate their porches, sidewalks, gardens. There's over 400 of these installations. You go on our website, paradinginplace.com, and you can see a map of Portland where all these are. And then this weekend, myself and a caravan of 10 to 12 cars, our queen, dignitaries of our sister organizations, some clowns, just a festival experience. We drove through these neighborhoods saying thank you. Normally these wonderful people, hundreds of thousands of people come downtown to enjoy a parade. We just drove through their neighborhood quietly, just saying thank you. Let them know we were coming, but it's called our Porch Parade, and did that this week, and we'll do that next week as well, just to keep the spirit of Rose Festival alive.
Porch Parade, that is such a great idea. And so, Jeff, how are you integrating your partners into some of the virtual events that you're doing?
We are basically trying to incorporate as many partners as we can. Certainly our premier sponsors. We have 5 high-level engaged partners, 5 of a total of 50 or so Rose Festival sponsors in the context of our total sponsor portfolio. But there's 5 premier sponsors, and those 5 are integrated in everything we're doing with basic logo impression work. And as we go a little bit further into our parade presentation, which I'll talk about in a minute, we're going to do some video work with that. But basically, it's an integration of our sponsors and everything we're doing virtually, whether it be logo representation or things of that nature. And it's just one benefit of many that we can do, but it's not to substitute for the event themselves, but it's really trying to tell the story that thank you to those sponsors for allowing Rose Festival to happen every year. And that's the message and the platform we're delivering. And an example of what we did is on our local Fox affiliate, we rebroadcast last year's parades and integrated a 30-second commercial. And it was just a really subtle, nice message. Say, Rose Festival's been there for 100 years. We'll be there again in the future. And thank you to these partners for their support. And doing so in an advanced way. So when we do have the challenging conversations of not delivering benefits, we're going to point to a story of how their support is propelling the future of Rose Festival. So that's a sampling of how we're integrating our premier sponsors. And then there's lots of smaller level sponsors, when appropriate, will put their logo in front of places. For example, on the virtual opening night stage, we had we had a video board behind the band that was subtly rotating some of our sponsors that normally would have had a presence on opening day of Rose Festival. So just integration when appropriate, and delivering a little bit of value, but also trying to tell a story.
So you mentioned that you have 5 key sponsors and then somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 60 other sponsors that support the Rose Festival. And so I'm curious, can you tell us how are you approaching those sponsors in this given situation, and how are they responding to you?
It's a great question, and it's a uncharted territory for us as a local nonprofit, as well as all other entities that sell sponsorships, to not have a festival in a traditional way that you've sold to the corporate community. How do you continue that conversation in a positive way and make that work favorably to our organization? Our whole effort is to engage in a conversation that allows us to have support without remedy. And that's basically what that means is we're trying to convince our clients and sponsors, all of our friends, to say, we needed you, we need your support. And without remedy meaning without having to pay their money back or even deferring for next year. That's the primary goal. Doesn't mean we'll each reach that level of success with all of those sponsors. So individually customizing is really the goal. That's not a new theory in sponsorship development. It's not a cookie cutter A, B, or C. It's individualized, customized selling of sponsorships. It's the same concept in this, what we need to do. We need to customize and integrate every one of our sponsor conversations in a different way. So the tactics behind that is a script written out in advance, preparation for every conversation. It doesn't matter if they're a large 6-figure sponsor or a small 5-figure sponsor, does not matter. Having a conversation strategy that helps you deliver your story and your message. And our message to our sponsors is thank you. We've been with you for years. We've delivered a great sponsorship solution for you. We'll do that in the future. But right now we need your help. And planning that conversation to go a couple different ways. Scenario one is, yes, possibly we might have to give them their money back, or B, we might have to defer their money for next year. But hopefully the conversation goes well enough, you're going to have enough success that you won't have to do that. And that's our strategy, and mapping all those conversations out in advance, thorough preparation for them is exactly what we are doing. And we've started these conversations. It's a little early, Paula, to go too far into them because the Rose Festival virtual experience happening right now, and our grand petite parade happening on June 6th, where a lot of sponsors will get representation for. We're planning that conversation after June 6th, but the early conversations with sponsors who have already asked us what we're doing, the response is pretty good. And it's good in the context of they understand the Rose Festival's value in the community. And I want to just say that I think that there's a distinction between a Rose Festival Foundation and a nonprofit versus a for-profit entity that produces events. In that nonprofits like the Rose Festival have a little bit of an advantage, or a significant advantage, in telling our philanthropic story about how their support helps pay the bills and keeps the lights on so we can have a future festival. And that's the abruptness of the conversation, meaning is candid and honest with them, saying, as our nonprofit, your support is critical to having a Rose Festival, always has been. And we need to continue to have a Rose Festival in the future. Thus, really could use your support without remedy this year as a form of a contribution, and moving the conversation from there.
And so, Jeff, I'm curious, what percentage of your sponsors have agreed to a remedy without further distribution of benefits or assets?
Well, again, I want to put a huge caveat next to this, Paula, that we've barely scratched the surface specifically. I can tell you that out of the 5 premier sponsors, just put it in that box, because those are by far the most important conversations, because if we have success in those, the rest should be okay. And right now, 40% of those sponsors have said, yes, we're with you. We understand that. So that's 2 out of the 5. Those are the only 2 that we've had the actual conversation with. We're waiting again until we have a little bit further down the road.
Mhm. So I have to just applaud your preparation in developing a script, particularly given the fact that you've been in this business for a very long time and have very deep relationships, but that you still take the time to be really well prepared. You know, we hear from sponsors all the time that there are calls they receive where people are clearly not prepared for the conversation. And so really applause to you and your team. So, Jeff, from an industry perspective and with a bit more focus on community events, let's talk about the various options for working with current sponsors, assuming we're working outside of the contract. How are you approaching them at this time?
That's a great question, Paula, because working outside of the contract is the heart of the matter when you're not able to deliver a standard set of benefits because of a situation like a pandemic that we've all experienced. There's a couple of different solutions. First of all, it's partnership-based, it's people-based, it's candid and honest conversation with our sponsors, explaining what the situation and trying to provide some solutions for to show your interest in their particular business need. So here's some things that I think are on the table for that conversation. First one is can you extend value to sponsors outside what you normally do and during a festival experience, in our case, to a different time of year? Can you do that? Can you offer something else? That's different than just a deferment to the following year, basically a cut and paste of that agreement and move it to the next year. That's a solution for sure, and better than returning money in a cash refund situation. So you could do that, although not the most ideal remedy because it hurts you down the road, doesn't solve the overall liquidity challenges with sponsorship dollars and spending the dollars now under operations, but it's something you could do. So in our case of Rose Festival, we'll talk about solutions without remedy. It's really developing, completely reliant on the ability to connect with your sponsors from a human standpoint, being personal with them and saying, here's the challenge that we have, here's what we'd like to do, and here's our solution that's not of refunding and not of deferment, but extending the benefit to a different time of year. Or in the case of nonprofits, which are at extremely advantage in this particular strategy, is to treat their sponsorship almost like you would a philanthropic gift and say, thank you. We're going to acknowledge you in the form of a thank you, but we really need those dollars to help us for this build a community celebration in the future. Because this is being honest with them. Tell them it has a devastating effect on your bottom line, this pandemic. Not being able to produce a festival in the way you had hoped. Tell the story, share the numbers, and ask them. They can say no, but ask them to think of their sponsorship more as a philanthropic gift to the community. So those two solutions, whether it be extensive benefits, a different time of year, complete something different, added value, make goods, or an outright contribution of donation is what the two I would focus on as strategies as you're building scripts with sponsors and provide solutions for them.
Yeah. Refunds are such a challenge for community events because the sponsorship money is helping to cover the operational costs throughout the year. And so if a community event is in a situation in which a sponsor is looking for a refund, that can be financially, as you said, devastating to an organization. And so I'm curious, do you believe in the future that we may call out a specific percentage, if you will, of the partnership and in the agreement that wouldn't be refunded in the case of a cancellation for whatever reasons in the future, because that percentage is allocated to the operations of the event?
I think that's likely to be true. I think that if you're selling sponsorships, you're going to have to be more transparent to say a chunk of the sponsorship covers overhead and not an event itself. It doesn't pay for the stage. It doesn't pay for the artists on the stage. It pays for the ability to produce an event, or in our case, a community celebration. I think some transparency in the selling process and even in a contract is probably will come out of this, because what will also come out of this, because I can guarantee that a lot of sponsors will be issuing their contracts in their own legal language versus relying on the event. They'll do that to try to protect themselves from this very question. So it's going to be an art of negotiation. I already started to see more and more contracts come across my desk from sponsors, which are far more legally protect the sponsor, more one-sided than it is the festival, like in our case. 10 years ago, we were issuing pretty much 95% of all contracts were coming from my office with our language that we wrote to protect us, and sometimes back and forth. That started to change just in the last 3 years. It's no longer 95%. It's probably more like 80% of contracts we write, mean 20% come from sponsors themselves. I think that's going to skew even more in a post-pandemic world where sponsors will send us their legal language. And so the answer to the question that we've addressed is to protect the festival and to protect the selling organization. I think you'll have to be transparent with what that cost is and ultimately spell that out and carve that out. I think that's an important distinction. I'll also say that while I can't predict the future of what will happen, I think those entities selling sponsorships who sell sponsorships on the basis of an organization sponsorship, not an event-based sponsorship, will have a better chance of dealing with these remedies and situations, because essentially that company is putting the lights on the whole organization from an umbrella standpoint, and it doesn't pinpoint to a specific event. That's I think a strategy that could emerge as more selling sponsorships for the sake of the organization and umbrella context versus event-based. And then of course benefits will follow, but really trying to look at it more as an entire organization. And last, like I suggested in a prior question, is I do think spreading out inventory and assets year round will help protect you from if you have just one thing with one sponsor and one time a year and something goes wrong, you have problems. If you can spread out that benefit, it just increases the ability that you can spread out the risk.
And I think so many of us, from professional sports teams to community events, are learning how to do that right now as we take programming virtually, right? So we're figuring out how to spread out the season or the partnership throughout the entire year.
For sure. I think that's absolutely what's happening. For sure. Going to spread things out throughout the whole year and really just because that's one of the reasons we have a spread out festival is spreading out the risk. And we do it for weather reasons. Like if we had the fair just taking place on one weekend, City Fair, in late May and June, that's some vulnerable weather. We spread it out over 3 to 4 weeks. Therefore, it spreads the risk out. And I think developing a portfolio of events, things that are sponsorable over a longer period of time will help out, as well as lots of virtual assets and benefits. I think that's certainly going to change. I also think that just the pure art of selling sponsorships, which is so reliant on face-to-face, you're going to see it like this. You're going to be selling sponsorships in 15-minute Zoom meetings. I think that's certainly in the short term, as you try to plan 2021 or 2022, I think you'll be selling differently and doing it in a lot of these settings for sure.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, Jeff. And I would encourage people to, take some classes on presenting over Zoom. I think we're all going to be doing it a lot more in the future, and it does require a bit of different skills.
For sure. It's definitely your presentation. And I think the other thing that we are doing that I haven't touched on is we are working on we're doing way more video content than we ever have as an organization, and really trying to put it out there and tell our story. And it's an important story of our relevance, important to the community right now. And that can help us with selling sponsorships, will help us with City Hall, things of that nature. So integrating those video elements into a presentation where you share your screen and you're interacting with a prospective sponsor, I see that as critical to the art of selling in the future, is doing so from a video element versus face-to-face.
I can't imagine doing a presentation over a telephone. I think those days are gone, right? And for those of you who are watching Jeff and I today, if you catch yourself presenting a sponsorship over the telephone, stop and get on Zoom.
I just think that this is something that I've as CEO of Rose Festival, I've been involved in sponsorship sales as a sponsorship manager and sponsorship director early in my career, and I'm still highly involved in Portland as in my role, amongst other roles. But I think it's important as we get out of this pandemic era, that everything's likely to change. Everything that you learned 10 years ago as was this practice of selling sponsorships. And this was already changing with different seminars and things. I think it's really changing. And I think that to be successful, you have to have the right frame of reference to go, yeah, I learned that 10 years ago, and that's go to 15 years ago, and that's go 3 years ago. But I really think that skills learning quicker now and what's going to change in the business community and being able to adapt is going to be really critical coming out of this for entities who want to be successful selling sponsorship, is to learn, pay attention, do as many webinars as possible, as many seminars as possible, and just share information. Because while I've been involved in the organization for 20 years and sold a lot of sponsorships, I'm going to have to do things differently. Rose Festival is going to have to do things differently. Even when we get back to a sense of normalcy, I think things will be different in how we present pitches to our sponsors and the benefits to deliver, to the contracts we write. It's all going to have some level of change in the near future.
Yeah, Jeff, I sure agree with you on that. I think COVID-19 is going to accelerate getting us as a sponsorship industry to a place that we should have been already. And I think we're going to arrive there a lot faster than what we had planned. And to me, that means big ideas, asking smart questions, really listening, developing true partnerships. And as you mentioned, partnerships that last throughout the entire year and encompass the entire organization. And we've needed to do that over the last couple of years at the very least. But I think going forward, it's going to be required, and we're going to have to get there as an industry quickly. How else do you think sponsorship marketing is going to change in the future? And I'm also curious, what's one piece of advice that you would give to a sponsorship sales leader on how to prepare for that?
I think here's a couple of thoughts on that question. It's quite possible you will see greater collaboration within other events or other properties. First of all, there may be less of them out there. Some, especially small nonprofit events, won't survive COVID-19. They just won't. They may not have any reserves to rely on it. They'll reemerge, maybe a smaller all-volunteer organization. And I think that will benefit those that have the ability to partner with other events and cross-sell events in a more partnership-based way with other, not just yourself, selling other events to, and like, for example, that'd be, if I was using Portland as an example, Rose Festival selling 2 or 3 other events as part of selling Rose Festival. I think you might see more of that just because there's going to be less events and they're going to be all fighting for the same dollar. And some collaboration, I think, could prove effective. So that's possible. I don't say it's probable. I say it's possible, that collaboration of other events. But yeah, I think that at the end of the day, as we're moving beyond what I hope to learn and move forward on is to refresh the face of Rose Festival in a way that represents our meaning to the community versus just a standard deliverable of benefits to a sponsor. I think we already knew this, that we have a value in our community, more of a social value. And how do we measure that? And how do we tell our story? That's going to be true. That's going to be really important to selling future Rose Festival sponsorships and properties, is how we present ourselves and our value in the community, and versus just a return on a benefit on a stage sign of things of that nature. So that's what I think is going to be a springboard for more reinforced thinking about selling, and the value of your marks and logos matter, and how do you, and really, really itemizing that as true value. That's what the sponsors are purchasing, and then, but delivering that in more of a community feel. Also social activation of social causes post pandemic is going to be taking even more important role. How corporate community is emerging to the health crises of today and the health crisis of tomorrow, and how they present themselves at an event, I think is going to change as well. And through an opportunity for us as we sell sponsorships to think like that. So those are just few examples that I think are on the horizon, and most importantly is just the ability to adapt and customize everything, which is not a new piece of information for those that have been around sponsorship sales a long time.
Right. It sure isn't, but I think that there's still a lot of opportunity to grow in that area. And I think that sponsorship salespeople will be required to do that. And if you're not there yet, it's really important that you get there quickly. And that is customization, because every company has a different challenge and you need to develop a solution, right? A creative solution that helps accomplish those very specific goals.
Absolutely correct. Couldn't agree more. Just customization and the power of relationships is the last element of that. And those relationships is what ultimately people connect with people. And it may be virtual through a screen in a pandemic era, post-pandemic, but they really do connect with the story you're telling and the people telling it. So surround yourself with good people and tell your story in a very human way. I think is going to be key to success. And I think there's an opportunity for all of us as we get through this to really take advantage of moving it forward move our festival forward in our case, or whatever you're selling, is to reposition yourself people-minded, integrated with great people. And let's not forget the power of volunteers, like the Rose Festival has. Those volunteers helping sell your sponsorship is something we haven't touched on, but the relationship of connecting the dots doesn't have to come from a CEO. It can come from people within your organization. I think that's really going to be important as well, to have people represent you and talk positively about what you're trying to achieve. And that spreads into the corporate community quickly.
Mm-hmm. And for events like the Portland Rose Festival, you have such a wonderful volunteer program, and what a great opportunity for sponsors to get more involved, right? And the volunteer program also provides an employee engagement opportunity for your partners.
Yeah, we look at especially our premier, and I highlight 5 premier sponsors just because they're distinctly different than all the other sponsors that we have in our portfolio. And one of the things that makes them different is a requirement to engage and activate from a volunteer standpoint. So they not just pay us a sponsorship fee, a sizable one, but they're required to activate their employee base. They're required to activate a charitable contribution side. Those are elements that, and the requirement's only the word requirement, using it as an R word, as do this, but at the end of the day, we're not judging them on that. It's just part of the expectations, and setting that tone with further sponsors deeper into our portfolio, I think is going to be helpful, because it really does help Rose Festival a lot, knowing that our key partners are engaging their teams, their volunteers, their clients with their sponsorship, but also that's kind of the return they're getting. They're getting that internal culture of positivity that really, really exists. And not to call all of them out, it's too many to call out, but I have to call out Alaska Airlines and how they present their sponsorships, more than just about booking flights. It's really about activating their people side of their company. And you see that, and when they get involved, and their parade entries are very much telling a story of how the culture of their company, but integrating their people. And then their volunteers are out passing out bags to pick up trash on the parade route, to doing a number of things. So that's a success story of that element. But there's a lot of companies that do that, but I just highlight them just because they're so good at sharing their company culture and also getting their employees involved and engaged with Rose Festival.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that example, because it really is, I think, the new standard, right? And how to work with partners, and also being transparent. And as you had said, Jeff, setting the expectation for how you want this partnership to develop and evolve and operate. And I think sponsors really appreciate that. That's why you have true partners.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, for sure.
Yeah, terrific. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And we are cheering you on from the sidelines. Thank you so much, Jeff, for all of your time and your insights and your ideas. Great information today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on. It's just fun to talk and visit and share the art of sponsorship that changes all the time, especially in these COVID days. So I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you today, and I'm always learning as well. It's why I'm sharing information. I'm getting information too that's coming my way from a variety of different ways, learning as we go. I think that we're all doing that these days.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you. This is a time for all of us to be learning and exchanging ideas and sharing information and helping all of us to kind of elevate what we're doing and develop stronger partnerships in the future. So thank you for sharing all of your expertise and with such generosity. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Paula. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.